Matt Makens here, AgNow weather time. Let's get to it. There's a wet phase that's going to favor a lot of the country, and that's going to be happening this week before a drier phase next week. Let's sort it out. Here's some of the hazards that we'll have for this particular week. A lot of heat from Oklahoma City down to the Gulf Coast, out to about Montgomery into the panhandle of Florida here. So there's going to be some high temperatures here. Obviously, kind of a dry phase for a couple of days. We'll get some moisture. So we're going to see that drought number continue to increase as we just did. More on that in a moment. There's going to be some heavier rain, though, more in the Osage and Flint Hills regions from Kansas City to St. Louis, down toward the Boot Heel in Missouri. That's going to be the focal point of some heavy rain, as you'll see in a moment, as well as the East Coast. It continues to see some very heavy rainfall. Relatively quiet for the West Coast. Not silent, but relative to eastern areas, a quieter phase for you. Here's a check of the soils, some of that drought that has been updated. Here's the latest drought monitor, and again, it includes some abnormally dry areas, which aren't technically drought, and that's yellow, so let's wipe those off. We've seen the drought numbers increasing here across the Northwest, down throughout New Mexico, West Texas, but notably in Kansas and pockets of Oklahoma. Oklahoma saw a big increase in the drought footprint across the state just over a short period of time. And that's some of the flash drought conditions we've chatted about previously here on AgNow. We're going to see a wetter period briefly, and then another onset of some drought. So we're leaning into drought. We've got a couple of these periods where it's going to come on really quickly. So heads up there if you're around Oklahoma, northern Texas, or in Kansas. Let's take a look at the timeline of the storms as we go throughout the next week. This starts on Friday, August 9th. The timeline is right up here on the left. I use mountain time, and you're going to be able to track the thunderstorms as they progress across the country. And as I do at this time, I'll shut my yapper and let you watch the timeline. Okay, as you focused in on when you may have those storms moving through your area, here's the total moisture. And again, they're very spotty, thunderstorm season. Your neighbor may get a lot and you very little. But let's just talk about in generalities, what's the rough estimate of total precip on the way? And what grabs my attention continues to be Mexico. A better monsoon season than expected there. Valuable moisture, obviously. Some of that moisture streams into western Colorado. So Colorado, parts of the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, a good focal point of water there. And some of that moisture does move up into the plains, the northern plains. South Dakota and Nebraska will catch some moisture. But perhaps the biggest bullseye to me is right in here. Let's fly the map down, and we'll have Colorado on one side, Missouri on the other, and the bullseye of moisture here around Jefferson City or Columbia approaches, it goes over 4 to 5 inches, approaches the 5 to 7 inch range, and perhaps even higher with some isolated totals. Not to scoff at what's happening in Colorado. Good moisture there in the high country, in the northeastern plains, anywhere up to near 2 inches. And the same for the panhandles here, nearly 2 inches. There's going to be a small pocket somewhere around Stillwater, Ponca City, up toward Tulsa. So some areas in there may pick up around a 2-inch total also. Valuable considering the drought as it's increased recently. And then what's ahead for next week. More on that in a second. Let's take a look at those weekly outlooks now. Temperatures this week with the moisture coming in cooler than average for much of the country, but a bullseye of heat hits the central states next week, continues into week number 3 and week number 4. So a hotter story to tell over the next 4 weeks beyond this week. Moisture-wise, favoring moisture in the central states this week, drier the next 3. And with that, the hazards we'll talk more on in depth next week. Here they are. For next week, we're going to start to see the drought continue through Texas into Oklahoma after this brief reprieve with some of the rainfall. We'll also see some parts of the Delta region increasing with drought. Meanwhile, the east stays very soggy. That's going to help some of the drought numbers here across the Appalachians, the east, the mid-Atlantic. That's going to be helpful there. In some cases, too much water. But again, we'll have more on this next week.